Matters. We are the Psychology Podcast. So, I'm your host today. My name is Sunling, and we've got a very exciting episode lined up for today. So, we're diving into the life and contribution of Mary Whiton Calkins in our today's podcast episode. And she's one of the psychology most overlooked pioneers. Okay, so now, before we get into this episode today, don't worry, we're not doing a boring lecture because we are a podcast.
Yes.
So, by joining in today's session, we've got a great panel here to break it all down for us. So, joining me today, here's everyone, and then let's have everyone introduce yourself first, I guess. So, because just a short introduction before the episode starts and getting to know each other better. Okay, so let's start from you.
Okay, hi, I'm Lijun.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Wow, thank you so much. Anything else? I'm actually a historian. I don't look like it, but I'm actually a historian. Okay, so I'm actually going to set the scene for the era of Calkins, where she lived in, and also where she worked in, and also the state of psychology at the time, and her struggles as a woman in academia. SP309. So yeah, this is what I'm going to be doing about today. Shall we move on to the next person?
Ooh, interesting.
Okay, hello everyone, my name is William and I am the experimental psychologist. My job is to highlight Calkins' pair associates memory experiments,
Wow.
explain them in simple terms and connect them to concepts that we still use today.
Okay, but I think we forgot one thing. We forgot to say hi to our Dr. Khairuddin. Okay,
Oh my
3,
God.
2, 1. Hi, Dr. Khairuddin. Okay, so I think Dr. Khairuddin is familiar with me. So okay, I am Kelly, and I will be the role of philosophical scholar to talk about what the contribution of Mary Whiton Calkins. And out of topic a bit. What about you guys today? We are talk about wearing the black, but what about you guys?
Colorful, adding a color.
Any colors. Don't need to be so sad. Don't need to be.
Okay, so yes, Monday blue, you are the Tuesday red, and how about you? Wednesday brown?
Yes.
Okay, so that's all from my part. Let's see.
Okay, thank you. So, hello to our audiences or our audience, Mr. Khairuddin. My name is Patient. So I will be the critic for today's session. I'll be basically judging her approach.
Basically just mean.
Yeah, I'm a mean girl. Okay, so I'll be talking about. I won't be talking, but I will basically be explaining a little bit about the disadvantages of her approach and the way that she views things. So I hope you enjoy. I'm not a mean girl, okay?
Hello everyone, I'm Yvonne and I will be the student researcher today, and then my job is to keep things relatable, ask some clarifying questions. So basically it's just doing research about Calkins. Yeah.
I hope your research goes well.
Thank you.
Wait. Let's just describe our location, where and we are.
So I really wanting to ask this. So why are we in the karaoke room?
I think Dr. Khairuddin will be curious why we are booking a karaoke room. Let's talk.
To
Why?
make this podcast more interesting.
Yeah, and actually is we can't find the location in
Well,
uni and college. It's really full. It's really full. We don't know why.
I don't know.
Okay.
Let's move on.
Okay, so let's start our podcast.
Okay, so before we start, I wanted to say thank you so much for all the introduction and also welcome everyone for joining this episode today. So before we start, I want to ask everyone, how are you guys feeling? Are you guys ready?
I'm tired already. This one is our second cut already. Second recording.
Okay,
Let's continue.
I guess we can get into it. Okay, so first, before we actually talk about Mary Whiton Calkins, so we have to understand about her background a bit. So we're gonna dive into that. So we'll be starting off with some context. Gonna start by asking the historian. So, what kind of world was Mary Whiton Calkins working in? So, can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, sure. So, if talking about the world that Calkins is working in, it will be actually about the late 1080s and also the early 1090s. So, it's actually a very exciting time for psychology. So, I would say that during that time, psychology is actually a transformation for psychology. So during that time, psychology is actually evolving from philosophy to become an independent subject. So that field was just actually to try to break away from philosophy, not trying to associate psychology with philosophy anymore, and to also to find its identity as a science. Right? So we actually had people like Whiton. I'm very sure you guys are very familiar with that. And also William James, the first, I would say the first psychology someone, okay, right. So William actually had run his first psychology lab in Germany, and also for William James, he actually shaped psychology according to his own principles. So during that time of psychology, many scholars, many academicians actually had their own understanding on psychology instead of having a similar set of understanding towards philosophy. So I would say that's the most important time during psychology. Right. So during the same time, American philosophy was actually influenced by pragmatism, where pragmatism is actually emphasizing the practical consequences of ideas. So it was actually a period of innovation and also experimentation. So they're trying to look into what is the difference between psychology and also philosophy. So, but there's this challenge, right? There's this challenge. Okay, academia was actually still overwhelmingly male-dominated. You can see like Whiton is a male, William James is a male. Who else? Sigmund Freud is a male. Right. So actually, women weren't allowed to go into graduate programs. Wow!
I think it's really unfair. It's really unfair and kind of gender discrimination is likely heavy in the era.
I think we can't say that because I'm not really sure what is happening during that era. But mostly, even though like that female have the same qualification as a male, they weren't actually allowed to go into the graduate programs to get their degree. So very similar to Mary Whiton Calkins. So she actually studied under William James and also Hugo Roosevelt at Harvard. Wow, Harvard!
Oh my God,
the most
Harvard
prestigious university in US that time. But she was actually refused to run her degree from Harvard even though she actually completed all of her requirements of PhD. PhD guys, PhD.
Oh my God!
It's not just a undergraduate bachelor's, it's not just master, it's PhD.
In that era, the PhD title is quite quality.
So the main reason they given is that she was because she's just a woman. She didn't get a PhD degree, so I'm not really sure why she didn't get a degree.
Wait. So she basically did all the work for PhD but still got nothing. That's really insane.
It's pretty insane.
I would say that everyone in this room would think that it's insane. So pretty much it's very frustrating when you think about it, right? But instead of giving up, she actually built one of the very first psychology lab in Wesley College, and also as a role of educator, she trained the first generation of the students. So you can see that like most of the earlier psychologists are actually also influenced by her. So I would say that her influence is actually very big in terms of the psychology work. So and also in 1905, she became the first female president of the American Psychological Association. I'm very sure all of you have also heard a little bit of a name in terms of the APA association, right? So even though the system tried to push her aside in terms of pioneering for the first psychology subject, independent science, she actually carved out her own space and also left her own mark as a symbol, and we still talk about it today, right? What else we are doing this episode for?
It's true.
Yeah, so actually by listening to like all of like Mary Whiton Calkins like background and it allows us to like get to know her more a bit. So like as you say that she's the first woman president of American Psychology Association, and not only that, she also doesn't give up on doing what she wanted to do to contribute to the psychology field. So that really set the stage a vibrant intellectual era, but one full of obstacles for women like Mary Whiton Calkins. Okay, so now that we get to know a bit more about her, her story, her background, so we'll be moving on to the next part. So we'll be talking about Calkins' philosophical contributions to the psychology field. So, alright, let's talk about ideas. So for this part, we'll have our philosophy scholar so to tell us more about her contribution.
My favorite model, actually.
So what did Calkins actually believe about psychology? So tell us more about it.
Okay, sure. So, Mary Whiton Calkins is best known for her idea of self-psychology. So back then, psychology was either about breaking the mind into little pieces like sensation or ignoring the mind altogether. So, or like behaviorism later did. So, Calkins pushed back. She said psychology should focus on the self, a living conscious person. So, she described the self as unique, persistent over time, always changing, and relational. In other words, we just not random thoughts or behavior. We are a whole person who grow, stay connected to others, and make meaning out of our experience.
So basically, she was saying psychology should study me, like the full self, not just brain chemicals or
Yeah.
behavior chart.
Yeah, true. So she really believed that psychology task was to understand the full experience of herself. And beyond that, she had interesting things to say about pragmatism. Most people, like William James or the John Dewey, thought of pragmatism as anti-metaphysical, basically a rejection of abstract philosophy. But Calkins say no. Pragmatism can also include metaphysics. She describes something called metaphysical pragmatism, which is essentially a kind of idealism. So she wasn't just borrowing the idea, she reshaping them. So making philosophy and psychology work together instead of pulling apart. But she wasn't only a theorist, she also made big contribution in memory research. Her pair-associated learning, I think most of us is very familiar. Yeah. So ask people this method, especially ask people to memorize pair like color with color and then word with another word, and then recall them later. Like we are using this especially before the exam during the study week. We will remember the sentence and then repeat the sentence again just to remember it during the exam. Yeah, we can write it, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I think most of us experience this. Okay, so from this, she showed that repetition mattered most for the memory, followed by vividness and recency. That's still true today, because we're still using it by today. So think about how students learn new vocabulary. They repeat it and then make it stand out and review it right before a test. That's pure Calkins. So another thing she defined was introspection. Calkins, critics said it was unreliable, but Calkins argued that under control condition, it could still be scientific. So for her, psychology couldn't abandon consciousness. To really study people, you have to look the inner experience, not just outward behavior. Because we are the psychology student, we always say that we need to figure out the inner, not just figure out the behavior, right? So finally, she added her own twist to pragmatism. Thinkers like William James and John Dewey saw it as anti-metaphysical, all about practical results. But Calkins argued that pragmatism could also include metaphysics. So she called this metaphysical pragmatism, basically an idealist view that reality is shaped by conscious self. So she wasn't just borrowing ideas, she was reshaping them, building a bridge between psychology and philosophy.
Wow, that's actually really interesting getting to know more about Mary Whiton Calkins' philosophical contributions. So not only that she is really good in studying, but she also contributes so much to the psychology field with her own concept, which is the self-psychology. So personally, I really do like the concept, psychology with a human touch. So moving on, we'll be talking about another part. So now let's move into the experimental psychology and also the memory research. So as we all know, that Calkins, she wasn't just a philosopher, right? So she also did real experimental work. So let's have our experimental psychologist to talk more about this part.
Okay, hi guys. Exactly between 1982 and 1894, she actually did some groundbreaking experiments on memory. Her most famous contribution was the pair associations method. Basically, participants were shown pairs of items, like a color and a number, or a word and another word. Later, they were shown the first item and asked to recall the second item. It sounds simple, but from this method she discovered patterns we still talk about today. The first one is primacy effect. We remember the first items in a list best. The second one is recency effect. It is how we also tend to remember the most recent items. And the third one is interference. It explains how new information can mess with old memories.
Wait, so that's why I always forgot half my study notes before an exam. Interference messing with my brains.
Exactly. You can thank Mary for explaining that phenomenon. She was documenting these effects long before cognitive psychology officially became a thing. And honestly, it shows that she was not just a philosopher. She was right there in the lab, developing methods that were rigorous and scientific.
Wow, that's actually so cool. She was doing cutting-edge memory research before cognitive psychology was even a thing. So that actually shows that Mary Whiton Calkins does put a lot of effort into the psychology field and also in the memory research. So now that we know about the experimental field and then we also know about her research on the memory thing, so maybe let's move on to the next part. So now we are going to talk about critiques and counterpoints of Mary Whiton Calkins. So of course, as we all know that no theories is perfect. So critique. So what do you think were her weaknesses? Can you tell us more about it?
Okay, so I think based on our previous discussion, we have established that Calkins is a very influential, she's very admirable, she's so smart. But I have to pick on her approach using introspection. So introspection has a very big problem, which is about how people remember things. So as humans, the brain is very complex. People misremember, people forget, and sometimes they overanalyze things. And most of the time, no similar experiences is the same among two people. So for example, let's say maybe me, I'm the critic, and let's say we have the philosopher here. So the way that we experience something, we might describe it differently. So that was a very big issue with introspection. That made it very hard for her theories to gain traction between behaviorism and her own theory, because people during that time mostly focused towards observable behavior compared to your inner thoughts and how you perceive the world.
Yeah, that's the fair point. Because introspection was controversial, but I think it's important to remember why Calkins defended it also strongly. She didn't see introspection as just causal self-reflection. Instead, she argued for experimental introspection, where conditions are carefully controlled, repeated, and measured. This means introspection could still meet scientific standards. So for Calkins, introspection wasn't just a method, it was the only way to directly study consciousness and the self. She believed that without it, psychology risks losing sight of the very thing that makes us human. So our subjective experience. In fact, when she outlined her self-psychology, she emphasized that thoughts, feeling, and action are always experienced by a self, not in isolation. So even if behaviorism pushed her aside, her approach preserved something essential, a focus on meaning, identity, and inner life. So yes, maybe her approach didn't fit neatly into behaviorism or early neuroscience, but she made sure psychology never completely lost its connection to philosophy, and that's important.
Okay, so I highly agree with that. And introspection does has its own value, especially since modern psychology is circling back towards subjective experiences. But back then, this field wanted hard data, they wanted concrete evidence, and Calkins' self-psychology just simply did not fit that demand. So that was why she never became as famous as other psychologists like Freud, Skinner, or Pavlov.
Yeah,
Her
true.
ideas simply did not align with the trends that dominated the field at that time.
Yeah.
True, self-psychology relied heavily on introspection, which later behaviorists denied. But let's not forget, her memory experiments were experimental in the modern sense. They had clear methods, measurable outcomes, and replicable results. So, even if philosophy were sidelined, her legwork helped push psychology toward becoming a real science.
Wow, so upon hearing all of these opinions, I also agree, and I think that both trailblazer and product of her time, that is actually what makes her story so layered and interesting. Okay, so now let's move on to the next part after we listen about her critics and counterpoints. So now let's talk about her legacy and also relevance today. So this is also the final round of the podcast, and I want to ask that why should we care about Mary Whiton Calkins today? So let's ask this question. Let's have the historian to answer this question.
Well, she's actually a role model for persistence. As you can see that she actually continued to study psychology and to separate psychology from philosophy even though she was rejected by Harvard. That's the thing. And also she actually didn't just make contributions to psychology. So actually she is the symbol for resistance against the culture from Harvard. Okay, right? And also the story actually reminds us about the progress in science isn't just about theories and experiments. It's actually more than that. It's actually about who gets to be part of the conversation. So it's actually about who gets to contribute and who gets to say what they want to say. So by refusing to step aside, Calkins actually paved the way for women in psychology. And that's an achievement that deserves recognition because if you can see, there's a lot of pioneer that is after Calkins' idea and also after her resistance in terms of psychology. So I would say that this is why we should care about her. Why we should care about Calkins.
Okay, so for me, it's because she reminds us that psychology isn't just about the lab result or test score. It's also about the meaning, consciousness, and self-hood. These are philosophical questions. So, but they are matter from psychology too. Especially her work proves that philosophy and psychology don't have to be rivals. They can inform each other, and that's still relevant today. Yeah.
I say because the fingerprints are still on psychology. Every time we study how people learn and remember, we are building on the kind of groundwork she laid. She helped make memory research systematic, and I think that's pretty amazing. Considering she was denied a PhD but still contributed methods we rely on more than a century later.
Okay, so for me, I would say that her story shows how psychology doesn't just simply evolve within a vacuum. It is shaped by trends, bias, and even institutions. So Calkins reminds us that even great ideas can get sidelined if it does not fit into the dominant paradigm, which is demonstrated by how no one accepted her idea during her time and era. There's also situations where thinkers doesn't fit into the mold where society expects them to. For example, being a woman in a male-dominated field. So studying her isn't just about celebrating her work. It's also about recognizing how knowledge gets filtered and how these voices get heard.
For me, is because she makes psychology feel human again. We are not just test subjects or brains scans. We are self with meaning and purpose. So and also her fight to be recognized is super inspiring. As a student, it makes me think like if she could do all that under those barriers, then we really have no excuse not to push ourselves to.
So thank you everyone for the sharing. It was actually very interesting to hear about all the insights from different aspects, and that really captures why her story still matters in today's world. So we have come to the final. So in today's episode, we explore about Mary Whiton Calkins' era and her philosophy of self-psychology, her experimental work on the memory, and the critics of her approach, and also her lasting legacy. So, as mentioned just now by Patience, so she may not be as famous as Freud or Skinner, but she absolutely shaped the field of psychology. And it also reminds us that psychology is ultimately about the study of self. So, I want to take the time to thank everyone for joining me here today in the podcast session. So thank you to our amazing panels here, and also thank you everyone for listening. And lastly, I have a question to the audience. So what do you think should psychology put more focus back on the self? And yeah, I think that pretty much ends our episode for today. So that's all for this episode of Mind Matters, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye. See you guys next time. Make sure to not forget about Calkins, right? She fight against Harvard. So let's not enter Harvard, right?
Okay.
That's true.
Okay.
Bye.